site visit on the application for a variance relative to the use of this property for a horse. And Ms. Gray, if you'd like to give us just a synopsis of what you're looking to do.
All right. My horse is 20, and there's nothing. He's under health care of a vet. There's nothing wrong with him, other than the footing is very, very important to him. In other words, if it's rocky, he has a problem, and this is very, very sandy and very soft. I travel quite a distance every day to take care of him, and he is getting better, but it's wearing itself thin. And I am not young, and my horse is not young. And it's a hardship for me to travel, and sometimes I have to go twice a day. And he is up in the Ossipee area in Freedom. He's on the other side of the lake, which is approximately 24 miles one way. So if I have to go twice a day, it's 100 miles I'm traveling. So I've always had horses on my property. And when we moved to New Hampshire, I realized that we're on a lake, and I had more than one horse at the time. And I've been into horses for 50 years. And I am very, very fastidious about my horses. But my problems with my horse have come because someone else is taking care of him. It was not something that happened because of what I did. It was because of the facility he was in. So my thing is, I am asking for variance just so I can let him live out the rest of his life in a comfortable situation and make it comfortable for myself. All right? And I don't know if this is very important. I know people are concerned about the environment. One horse is not like having 10 horses. They're very easy to maintain. I've been doing it, like I said, for years. I do not have manure piles. I bag my manure, and it will be taken. We have a dump trailer inside the garage, and the manure will be taken to the dump, because I think that's people's biggest concern about horses, is that. Other than that, that's my case.
In terms of containment of the horse, are these posts approximately where a fence would be?
This is exactly where it would be. We go from, because it would have, in other words, I don't want him touching the fence if he's around the barn. So in other words, I would like the fence to go just straight down there, all right to there, to the trees. Very small area. Like I said, it's not sound. He does have problems, and he doesn't need a big area to run. The smaller, the better.
When you say the fence goes up, is it going to end at the garage there, or is it going to go up beyond the garage?
It would like it to go beyond the garage. In other words,
okay.
Inside, see the tree right here, the maple tree?
Yes.
It would just be a line going straight down there. Come around.
Oh, okay.
Inside the trees, and then just come back to it. And the property slopes down. It does not slope towards the lake at all.
So,
If you
which
s-
side
if
of the
it
trees are you
grates-
talking about on the fence?
I'm thinking about putting it on the inside.
Okay, because all the post holes are dug to the outside.
Yeah, that was before we moved all the trees.
Before we moved all these.
Cleared all the trees out when we originally had the line so that we would have, a tree line just to dress it up. Gonna run the post down through here, keep it even with that tree right there. And the big thing is, if you look at the lay of the land when I hear about the concern, there's nothing going to run off. Lowest part of the land's here, all the other land is upslope. It sits inside like this.
What is down in that depression over there? Is that
Nothing.
is it water down there?
No,
You can walk in there.
just
if you
land.
want.
Does it
We own down
the lake?
over
It appears it may pitch towards the lake. We're just looking at if it
I
could
know
carry.
the lake is there, but I didn't
It
know.
just
Sometimes
goes, it's like a
there's
hollow.
water.
It goes down, and then it goes back up again.
Is water going
But it
No,
doesn't-
well,
it
in the
doesn't go
runoff
to
in the
lake
spring there
because
would be.
The driveway's down.
During melting season.
It
It's gonna follow the natural grade right to the lake.
Okay.
That's not realistic.
I didn't notice that the last time we came.
No, the
it
only
was
reason I
really-
say that seriously, because we've talked about this
But-
before. That septic system sitting on the hill above that lake over there, that leach field, is a lot more dangerous to that lake than this would ever be with one horse. Now, I can bring an expert in with a letter that will testify to that.
Okay. I'm just, stating an opinion
Anyway,
that
You
when the
asked
grade
if
goes
this
to the
way.
lake, when things melt, they're gonna run towards the lake.
It's not
If
gonna
the
run
water
to-
doesn't run uphill.
How's it gonna go from here over to there? Just
Yeah,
explain it to
let
me.
me suggest that
That's-
some of what we're talking about is subject to the hearing this evening. I would say if anyone, any of the people here have questions to ask of the Grays, this would be the time to do it.
Well, my concern is everything swales this way. From that land, you can see it naturally goes down the hill, and that hill goes to the lake.
No, it doesn't. There's a driveway there. It does not go to the lake.
It's built up back there. Well, from what
There's
we
a
can
drive.
see here, it's going down.
We can walk down there if you want. We can walk down
It's
the
still
driveway.
going downhill though, is what I'm saying. Everything is going downhill from here. That's all.
The
Just stating the
horses,
fact.
I think you had said 22?
22. And I
Yeah.
only want it for the life expectancy of the horse. He might live
Which is,
another
which
three.
is approximately how many more years?
He'd probably live another 3 to 4 years. It would not be for. I mean, I have no intention of having another horse here. This is not an ideal situation if you own a horse. If you don't have anything, there's nowhere to work a horse. You can't. It's impossible to do anything with a horse here. You know.
Anyone else have any questions of the Grays? George, any? Anything? Okay. Then I will close the site visit and we'll reconvene at 7 p.m. tonight at Town Hall. This is the site visit for the application of the Hendersons for a location of a generator and tanks at less than 20 feet from the sideline setback. If you would identify yourself and your role.
Tyler Matthews, Lake Living Consultants, and I'm the applicant.
You're
Agent.
speaking on behalf of the
Agent.
owners, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe you can give us a synopsis of what the proposal is, if you would.
We're trying to get approval for propane tanks and a generator within the 10-foot sideline setback of the neighbor.
And the location from the generator to the tanks is how many feet?
Generator to the tanks.
It has to be 10.
That has to be 10 feet?
Yep.
So 10 feet would be, that would be the
And the distance from the tanks to either building?
2 feet is what I'm asking for the generator and tanks off the side setback. Side setback.
But how
But
close
the
are they?
tanks themselves have to be positioned relative to any combustible surface, and it's 5 feet?
No, the tanks,
an opening.
these particular tanks can be set right up against the buildings.
Oh,
They have to be 5 foot from any penetration in the building. So that's the reasoning why the tanks aren't against this building. We have penetrations from each window, we have penetrations from the electric, we have penetrations from the gas, we have penetrations from the AC condenser. So we're trying to find an appropriate location. Right now, this tank is too close to the building. It's 4 feet, needs to be 5 feet from that window.
So
I mean, technically-
that one tank as it sits
It's too close. It needs to be
too close.
readjusted. I mean, it could be set right here, and it would be fine. Ideally, it'd be nice if you could just put them in one straight line,
That's what I would do.
which I
now,
think
yeah.
you might be able to do. If you could configure it into a straight line, it would give you more of a setback and more accessibility. You might have to kick the generator back a little bit more.
Yeah.
But if you were to do it in a straight line, starting at the fence, I think it would give a broader setback on the
And these tanks are how many gallon?
120.
Why not 150? 500-gallon tank?
Because it's a 10-foot setback from the
More
building.
restrictions.
All right.
It's kind of weird, but yeah.
Yeah.
Because the setback's
Multiple
different
little
on a larger
things.
tank.
Oh, all right.
Because it's a larger single unit.
Okay.
Any
Any-
question?
Go ahead.
What about the distance from the generator to that, structure? Is it 5 feet?
Well,
Or is it
there's two
less?
different generators. The generators now, most of the new ones are 18 inches to a structure. 5 feet from
'Cause
an opening.
there's no opening.
So
over
this
there.
building, it doesn't really concern because there's no openings.
And
This
it's
building,
not
that
combustible.
5 foot to the
Right.
opening
But
comes
this
into
is
play.
not combustible.
Well, it is combustible, but it can be 18 inches from the building on certain makes of generators.
Okay.
There's
Oh,
a
all right.
5-foot generator and there's an 18-inch generator. Depends on the
And you
housing.
checked that out.
Right, and that's
Okay.
something that would be verified
Yeah.
through the building department.
Are there locations on this property where the generator could be positioned without a variance?
I would say yes.
Where are all your mechanicals in your house? In the house?
Right here. So everything kind of. Anywhere else a generator would go would be more visible for neighbors, louder for neighbors. It would basically be somewhere in the middle of the yard.
Facing the lake.
Yeah, on the lakeside.
And it would be cost prohibitive too, because when you're trying to run all those wires to the.
Yeah, it'd be very costly.
But then where would the tanks have to be? Would they be
Well,
here?
there'd have to be an underground trench dug to the generator from where the tanks would be.
But right now, you're gonna check the,
Well, right now, he needs a variance to be within 10 feet of the
right,
property.
so he can, are we allowed to talk about this now, or should we
You
wait?
can ask questions regarding what we're
So,
seeing.
so these can be reconfigured,
I believe so.
and then that could be where it is.
Very closely, it's you'd have to be 5 feet from that unit,
Then?
that
oh.
whole unit,
Oh, okay.
not the frame, but the unit
Yeah.
itself. So, 5 feet from all the openings.
So, would we have, okay,
Judy, any questions?
No.
Well, the reason they're here is because I said we needed a variance because they're
Yes.
too close to the
I
setbacks.
understand that.
Yeah. George?
No questions.
No
But I'm
questions.
looking at that piece of wood, is that representative of the size of the unit you're intending to put there?
It'll be the base of it. The
Okay.
generator will be a little bit smaller than that.
How many
I think an 11. Okay.
Is it Generac or is it,
Generac.
yeah, it's probably bigger than that.
So that's what I should have said. It was that size, but
Again, we'd be verifying the setbacks
Right.
upon installation, they all go through the inspection process.
Victor, any questions on your part? Then I'll close the site visit and we'll reconvene on this matter at 8 o'clock tonight at 10.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Meeting will come to order. The first item on the agenda is the variance application by William and Janet Gray. We'll first hear from Ms. Gray, then we'll have any individuals who wish to speak in favor then speak. Then we'll have input from the code enforcement officer and any opposition. And lastly, we'll enter into the record various correspondence that we have received on this particular matter. At that point, the meeting will close to public input and the board will deliberate on the application. And before we start, I'd ask each of the members to introduce themselves to the audience. Robert, if you start.
I'm Robert Baxter, Maple Street, Valley Union.
Judith DeRoche, member.
Annie Robbins, member.
George Frothingham, Vice Chair.
Don Stewart, Chairman. And if we could, Ms. Gray,
Okay, do you want me to work from here?
you can, or you can come up here with the table, wherever you're more comfortable.
All right, my name is Janet Gray. I live at 190 Lord Road, and I am applying for a variance on my property to house a horse. The reason for my wanting to do this is that the horse is aged, and I am aged, and he requires a lot of care. He doesn't have a lot of capabilities to do much of anything, and he's basically a pet. He's not. I used to compete him years ago, but he doesn't compete anymore. So it's like he's kind of my best friend. And but anyway, my reason for this is that I felt that our property was deep enough that there were no neighbors that were affected by it. No one would see him. It's really difficult for me to I've been here before, and I know that it's very hard for people to understand. A lot of people associate horses with boarding stables or stables where they go and they take lessons. You don't have just one horse, you have a tremendous amount of horses. And when you have that type of facility, you have a tremendous amount of droppings from the horse's manure, and it's a lot of upkeep. What I do with the horses over the years, I have had probably 20 horses in my lifetime. I have had them on my property. I have never ever had a manure pile. I have always disposed of it, and been very meticulous about how I take care of my horses. I know that the board came up today, and where the stall is situated, it goes down. The driveway is above, but there is one area where it's not above, and if that is a problem, we can build up the land in that area to contain it. I think it's a very small section. We've gone to great lengths to build a facility that's very, very nice, and it's not a detriment to anyone. I mean, it's not like a shed row or anything. It's a beautiful building. My husband put a lot of time and effort into it, let me see. Oh, and I did include in the application for the variance a thing from the EPA in Massachusetts, and they have it where they specify that if you're within 200 feet of water, that you're perfectly fine as long as you have vegetation, and of course everything is picked up on a daily basis. So I'm just hoping the board will see my dilemma. I only want it for the life of the horse. If we sell our property, the variance would be null and void. It would only be for this particular horse for my own benefit, and that I'm not asking for anything more. I would never put another horse on the property, because it's not, I understand how people feel. It's not a very conducive place for a horse, but under the circumstances, I'm requesting a variance on my property.
Victor, just to confirm, the application was properly submitted, advertised,
Yes, sir.
and paid for?
Yes,
Okay.
the butters have been notified, the fees have been collected, the public notices went out on the 8th, was run
Okay.
on the 8th.
All right. Do members of the board have questions of Ms. Gray? We had the site walk this afternoon with most of the board present, so they've had a chance to see, in some cases again, what you're proposing. Being that we have jumped into winter very early, if the board was to grant the variance, would you attempt to bring the horse in this winter?
You can't do it now. Cannot dig the holes for fencing. It would be very difficult. I have to bring in mats to put down on the floor. At this stage in the game, no, I could not bring him in at this point.
So it's reasonable then to take the position that if we were to vote in favor of the variance, that it will not be effective until next spring at the earliest?
Until next spring, yes.
Okay. All right. Other members, questions of Ms. Gray about her application? George, anything?
The only question, I guess that, you may have already answered this, but you say that you will be picking up and storing the manure and then taking it to the transfer station.
Yes.
Can you state for the record how often you will pick up the manure?
Every day, sometimes twice a day.
Okay. Thank you.
And have you confirmed with the transfer station that they'll accept the manure?
Yes.
Okay. All right. At this point, I want to thank you for your input.
Okay.
I will ask members of the audience, if you wish to speak in favor of this application for variance, if you could identify yourselves and so speak. Seeing none, Victor, do we have any correspondence in favor of the application?
I did not receive that invitation.
There was
Well,
one
in
letter.
front of
Yeah.
you.
Yes, there's one
That
letter.
one letter that you just, I think you just copied.
Oh, she just brought that to
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
evening.
Let me ask you for a moment. All right. We do have a letter from Penny Kenyon and William Naring, 50 Violet Way. And they say the Grays have been our neighbors since they purchased the property. They've been good neighbors and have always maintained the property meticulously. We have no objection to the horse and are confident that the Grays will take excellent care for her. Thank you for your consideration. At this point, we'll open the meeting to the code enforcement officer, if you'd wish to speak on the application.
Well, the reason for the denial of the application is the zoning clearly states that there are no hoofed animals in fowl allowed within the shoreline district. It's been voted by the residents of the town into the zoning and added as a zoning item, personal agricultural, it basically says no hoofed animals or fowl allowed. In reference to cleaning manure, I don't know, I lived on a horse farm for several years, and in mud season, a paddock for a horse turns into pure mud, and I don't see any physical way to completely remove every bit of manure off the property. Another concern is at a meeting a month ago, an administrative appeal, Mrs. Grace stated that the horse is subject to continuous systemic infections. They come and go. It was about 11 minutes into the meeting. The minutes could be checked. I just watched it downstairs in the office just to verify that it was her systemic infections. They come and go continuously, which becomes a concern, I think, considering we're talking about waterfront property. My biggest concern is that, you let one horse in, and the next thing you know, you got the guy that needs his pet chicken, and then you've got the guy that needs his pet goat. And, nothing personal, but I understand it's your pet, but it's the next person's pet, the next person's pet, the next person's pet. And we open ourselves up to contamination of the lakes, which is probably one of our most important jobs in the department downstairs, is to protect the lakes. So that's, you know, I gave you packets before, clearly shows, I can give them to you again. They clearly show where the garage is, and that the barn is considerably closer than what was done in the setback affidavit by the Greys. And it shows that it's clearly less than the 500 feet allowed. It's clearly not, and there's a map in the back that shows the agricultural zone. That's a little tiny sliver of their property. For those of you that were out there, we walked down that right away. Clearly shows that. Shows the garage. And then for those of you that were there, you know that the barn is approximately 95 feet from the garage heading closer to the lake.
66 feet from
It's 464 feet from the lake to the garage, so you're 400 feet from the, if you're 66 feet as you just stated, you'd be under the 400 feet to the shoreline, which we're looking for 500. So I just think that it's a dangerous precedent to set, and you know, it was voted by the voters for that reason. So that's, I'm concerned of runoff going into the lake eventually. So.
Thank you, Russ. Any questions?
Is there any way to determine if that is in the aquifer district? I went on the town maps and looked
You have
at the
aquifer
layers.
maps, but you'd have to go down and check on
Okay.
the maps. We do have maps downstairs for the aquifer.
Were we supposed to open it up to for and against on the public hearing?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Oh,
we,
that's
we're,
after?
that would
Oh.
be after,
Okay.
after Russell. The question you asked about the aquifer, is that an element that you want an answer on tonight?
I think it's important because that determines the impact of the soils and the drinking water in that area.
Well, the shoreline district, that's the shoreline. I could go down and see if I can locate it, if you want. I can,
Okay, no. it's
I
not
go
that
down and take a look and see if I
What-
can.
Only
yeah, if-
because I
yeah.
could have made a mistake when I was looking at the data, so.
Yeah, if you would, and then we'll continue with the meeting. Thank you, Russell. Russell, before you leave the room, is there anyone else who has any requests of Russell before he leaves the room? Okay,
Coffee?
all right, thank you. All right. Now, at this point, I will ask for any opposition to the variance application. I ask any individual to stand, identify themselves to the board, and then offer what they may have to say.
John Stump, 140 Lord Road. A lot of the area, which my land also abuts their land, and that top land has clay in it and has a fine sand in it that does not absorb the water. I have a lot of runoff from my upper property because of that situation, and that's my concern with things flowing towards the lake or shallow wells, anything like that. That's about it, but I have noticed that that area up there, that parcel of land, there is a lot of what they call real fine sand. And when they put my septic system in, they had to remove all of that because of that, because it's no good for perk of any type, you know. So that's my only concern.
Anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition to the application? Ms. Gray? Ms. Stump? No? All right. Now, then I'll ask our clerk if we have correspondence in opposition to the application.
Yeah, I have, for the variance, I haven't received any from the opposition, other than what we got from the administrative appeal.
And what about the last letter from Pine River Pond?
Well, we've got
Is that
two letters that I'm
an
aware of.
association?
One from PRP and the other one from Cressman?
Chris.
I have a letter from Wendy and Fritz Cressman. You must have that one.
I don't have that one.
You forwarded it to
You
me.
sent it to me.
Oh, okay.
All right. Let me.
Do
I
you
thought
have
that
more
was-
than
This
one
is
there?
the one that you brought this evening. Is that
It
correct?
was actually here on the table when I arrived this evening. All right.
Mr.
And
this is
Chairman, do you have more than one of those letters there? Or is that just one letter?
I may. No, I don't.
Okay, no
That's-
problem.
that's the- But I'll read that,
Yeah,
the letter. Again, from Wendy and Fritz Crosman, and it was dated, this is opposition to the ZBA variance application of William and Janet Gray, to whom it may concern. Our property at 30 Grenier Road abuts the above applicant's property at 170 Lord Road. We are opposed to any variance from the Wakefield zoning ordinances, Article 3, Table 1. While we honestly appreciate the Grays' desire to move their aging and ailing family horse closer to home, we have several concerns as local lakefront landowners as well as neighbors. These concerns support a failure to meet the criteria for a rule waiver under the environmental water quality regulations, and they make reference to the applicable 1413.04A1 and 2. Specific concerns include: 1, high likelihood of water runoff and introduction of environmentally damaging levels of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and pathogens found in horse manure to the groundwater into Pine River Pond, as well as potential exposure of native wildlife to harmful pathogens. Second, high likelihood of odor as well as an increase in insect and rodent activity due to storage of feed, straw, hay, and manure. For reference, they've made reference to a publication called Horse Stable Manure Management. And from that publication, they indicated a 1,000-pound horse produces 50 pounds of manure daily. That's feces and urine. In addition, the daily stall waste of approximately 8 to 15 pounds. Excuse me. On-site storage and disposal of this material may not be sufficiently rapid or extensive as to minimize the resulting runoff, odor, etc. We formally request a denial of the above referenced variance application and the maintenance of the intent of footnote 17 of the Wakefield zoning ordinances article and table. Thank you for your consideration. Wendy and Fritz Cressman. That was one letter in opposition. Additionally, we received this afternoon a letter from the PRP Association, again in reference to the variance application. The PRP Association is concerned about manure management regarding this variance application as outlined below. Both the applicants and several of the abutters are members in our Lake Association, and the following is presented with all due respect to all parties involved and in keeping with our charter to protect the welfare of Pine River Pond and its environs. We request that the ZBA's review consider the following with regard to the public interest. In past years, PRP waters were placed at risk by nearby properties with animals in managing runoff. Decomposing manure produces ammonia and hydrogen sulfide, which present a significant impact to ecosystems. While daily collection and bagging of manure from the property is proposed, that may be encumbered during freeze-thaw conditions where deposits freeze before they can be removed, thus allowing an accumulation of manure despite the owner's best efforts. Any failure in the manure management plan that allows for manure-tainted runoff to enter the lake presents grave consequences to PRP's water quality and would pose bacterial and parasitic exposure, having human health impacts. Some manure storage is necessary on the days that the Wakefield transfer station is closed. Manure-tainted runoff contains considerable nitrogen and phosphorus that can lead to the growth of algae blooms and dense plant and algal growth, adversely affecting PRP. Oxygen in the water is depleted when algae or aquatic plants die and start to decompose. The lack of oxygen suffocates fish and other aquatic organisms. Also, extremely high ammonia levels in runoff from manure can kill fish. The ZBA considers approving this variance, and since the manure is to be removed on a regular basis, we request that specificity and definition be provided to that term, e.g. twice weekly or more, and proper location of the storage area. In the event the ZBA chooses to approve the applicant's variance, 1, the PRP Association would likely need to add a water quality monitoring point for this area, identical to what is performed upstream and at the inlet of Young's Brook, where manure management practices at the 2 properties under NHDES monitoring caused by manure-tainted runoff adversely impacted PRP's water quality. And 2, the PRP Association requests that the approval not run with the property and be granted for only the life of the horse contained in the specific application, and only for as long as the current owners comply with the stipulations outlined in this various application. Thank you for your consideration. Patty Philbrook, President. Do we have any other correspondence? No. All right. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak either for or against this before we close the public part of this hearing? What did you find?
You see the word violet?
Yes.
That's the lot in question. That's the aquifer districts. It's different stages of the district, but it's in the district.
Okay.
Yeah. You can pass it over if you.
Thank
you. There's different sections of the aquifer, but it is completely in it.
Thank you.
That was the easiest way to.
Yeah.
Does any member of the board have any questions they would like to pose either to the applicant or to any of the opposition or to the code enforcement officer?
How old is the horse?
22.
22. Do you have any idea of its life expectancy?
Probably 25, 26.
Male, female?
Gelding.
Gelding.
I would like to know about the, was it the Young's Brook situation on Pine River Pond, when that occurred? Was that?
That was some years ago. I just vaguely remember it.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone in the audience has any detail on that.
It's about the 2008 time, excuse me, it's about the 2008, 6 to 8 time frame, I believe it was.
Is it still being monitored?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anybody?
I would like to mention on the, is it okay if I speak about a different letter, Mr. Chairman? The, is it the Krasner's letter?
Yes. Is this something you want to hold for our deliberation?
Okay, sure, yes.
Okay, all right. Ms. Gray, is there anything you'd like to add either in response or rebuttal to what others may have said or the letters that came forward?
They make it sound so technical. I like I said, I gave the thing from the EPA in the Environmental Protection Agency from Massachusetts, and in there it states that if you're within 200 feet and you have a horse and it's properly taken care of, it's no danger to the
Different states, different standards.
and the EPA standards are very, very high.
Okay.
I
And-
mean, a study has been done extensively about it because, of course, there's a lot of horses. My intent is not to harm the property, not to harm anyone else's property. I mean, it would, you know, I don't know. It's a very difficult thing to say. People have dogs. A dog is far more damaging to the lake than a horse would ever be. That's, and everyone has dogs, and
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right, thank you. At this point then, I will close the public part of this hearing, and the board will now deliberate on the variance application. Ms. Gray, you're welcome to either sit back in the audience or stay where you are. That's your choice.
No. Okay, I'll sit here.
Thank you.
The chair's comfortable.
All right, we're being asked to approve a variance application that is contrary to the rules that are promulgated relative to the lakefront area. Those rules were specific about in essence, number of feet that could be encroached upon or not, you know, by, in this case, specifically hoofed animals or fowl. We've heard from the applicant, we've heard opposition, we've heard from the code enforcement officer, and I'd like to hear from each of you as to what your thoughts are as we sit here at the moment. Anybody?
Okay, having worked a little bit around horses, I know they usually have a tendency to want to go in a certain spot, which makes cleaning up a little easier. I guess I'd have a question that those couple days when you can't get to a transfer station, how you're storing it.
I have.
Now, at this point, Robert,
Okay.
if you wish to have Ms. Gray answer that question, we can allow that. If it's something of substance to your decision-making vis-a-vis this application. Yes or no? Is this something you need answered?
I'll withdraw that.
Okay, all right.
So, may I speak?
Sure.
Okay. So, I find this a very difficult situation as an animal lover myself, and I know how much you do love your horse. But a variance has to do with the land, not the plight of the landowner. And there are certain criteria that the land has to meet in order to grant the variance. So I just want you to keep that in mind when you hear me say things that may sound harsh, because I feel as though I'm following what I'm supposed to do in granting a variance. So everything that you've said, you know, I'm sorry that your horse is old, and I'm sorry that you can't you can't drive to take care of him. But I feel as though it's the board's responsibility to keep our thoughts on the situation of the land.
Judy?
I think one of our responsibilities as a board is to protect the water quality of all of the lakes. And I feel that if we decide to grant this, first of all, we are setting a precedent for anyone else. And we know the presence of animals close to the shore are going to affect the quality of the water, certainly in a negative impact. I mean, I understand the dilemma here, but I also feel that we as a board, if we have these regulations and they've been voted by people in the town, do we have the right to throw them aside, and then we would have to be responsible for the fallout?
One of the criteria for granting a variance is that the property should have a unique hardship or setting. And in this case, I feel as though it's really not unique. There are 3 properties that are 2 abutting and 1 near it that are the same size, and so I don't see any uniqueness to the property that would be a hardship to the applicant. The letter from, is it Krasner? I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Cressman?
Cressman.
I believe that they erred in their reference to the statutes that they addressed. I believe that they were referencing a state waiver. If the applicant were to go to the state for a waiver, I looked up what they, the envelope, whatever number it was. But they do mention being around horses, what the horses attract. And I live in the Aggie zone, and there are horses near me, and from personal knowledge, I can say that there are flies, and there are, the storage of hay and feed does cause, critters. I feel like this would change the character of the neighborhood, and the slope of the land that goes down to that I don't know what it's called, a ravine or a gully or that depression that goes down to the water concerns me.
George? Well, this has troubled me greatly, and I spent quite a bit of time researching and considering, and I guess I understand all of the arguments against the variance that I've heard or read, and there are a lot of good arguments, so I think maybe it wouldn't be such a bad idea to have somebody present some of the other side of the picture, and so I'd like to do that. And there's one thing I'd like to call everyone's attention to. I know the people in the audience don't have this book, although anyone that would like to look at it is welcome to do so. But this is the New Hampshire Planning and Land Use Regulation 2016-2017 edition. And opening that up to page 405. And if you don't mind, I'd like to read a brief section of that. The literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. For the purposes of this subparagraph, unnecessary hardship means that owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purposes of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property, and the proposed use is a reasonable one. And I think, if you don't mind my saying what I think this means, is first off, there is a reference to the purpose of the regulation that is being varied against. Everyone has already stated that the purpose is to prevent contamination of the lake. Certainly, I'm not in favor of contamination of the lake. I want to certainly make that clear. But then they're weighing whether imposing this regulation on this person does reduce the danger of contamination of the lake. In other words, enforcing this has the desired effect of preventing contamination of the lake. And along those lines, I'd like to ask you, Victor, for that location where the shed is located there, if the Grays wanted to put a septic system and a leaching field at that place, would that be legal?
In that area, I mean, they'd have to meet the setbacks, and I mean, it all depends on perk tests, if you can even have a septic or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's a kind of tight area from where they're talking about having a horse to roam, so I don't think a septic system personally would fit in there.
Well, one of the things, I said that I've been doing some studying, and I have, and one of the things that I did was study the map of the area. And in that area, there are a number of lakefront properties that are relatively small, much smaller than her property.
Mm-hmm.
And typically, depth of those lots in the area of 200 feet plus or minus from the lake to the back. I presume that all of those places have septic systems and wells. And obviously then these septic systems would be much, much closer to the lake than this house would be. And there were many of them. So we're talking one house at 400 or so feet from the lake, and numerous houses with septic systems less than 200 feet from the
Are we
lake.
comparing a horse to a septic system?
I am, yeah.
Oh. Well, I think it works a little differently.
Well, I'm not
I
convinced
I mean,
of
it's a
that.
holding tank, then it goes into a leaching field.
Into a leaching field.
Right.
And then
The
from the
waste
leaching
of-
field into the land.
Yes, the
Mhm.
fluids. The
Yeah.
waste stays and gets
Subsurface.
Mhm. Well, okay, I understand your argument, and
I
it
was
may
just stating
be-
fact.
Yeah,
I have no opinion.
the briefly getting back to the paragraphs that I read, were weighing the potential for contamination of the lake. And the fact, of course, that she is saying that she is going to pick up this waste on a daily basis. And to answer the question that's been raised, but I guess not answered, you mentioned the days that the transfer station is closed. I think that you said that you will store that in the garage that's on the property.
Right, I have,
Keep it out of the weather until you were able to take it to the
do you know what
transfer station.
construction 4mm construction bags are?
Okay.
They're very thick plastic bags.
Mhm.
There's nothing, doesn't leak out of them at all.
George, as you know, the public input is closed, so a question of Ms. Gray, I would suggest it's not appropriate. But please continue.
Okay, I think I have presented another side of the thing. And the only other thing that I would say, and I think that this goes along the thinking that's in the last part of the letter from the Pine River Pond Association, is that if a variance should be granted, it can be granted with a number of strong conditions having to do with expiration of that variance related to the life of the horse, or whether you would move out of the area, anything that would make this variance unnecessary, then the variance would lapse. Those conditions could be applied to a variance. And I certainly would not be in favor of any variance if those conditions were not applied.
Okay.
And I guess that's all I have to say.
In order for the board to grant a variance, there are 5 areas of consideration that we have to address. First, that the variance will not be contrary to the public interest. Second, that the spirit of the ordinance is observed even in granting the variance. Third, that substantial justice is done by granting the variance. Fourth, that the values of surrounding properties are not diminished. And fifth, particularly that George has just commented on, that literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. Those are the 5 areas that we have to address, either supporting or denying the petition. And I'll ask the board if you're ready at this point to address each of the 5 time. Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Then starting with the proposed use would not diminish surrounding property values. I would ask that a board member provide a motion on that topic as to whether, in his or her opinion, they feel that granting the variance would not diminish surrounding property values.
I make a motion to deny the first criteria because I believe that having a horse on that property would diminish property values.
Okay,
Because
let me stop you there.
Okay, sorry.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
All right. Now's the time for
Okay.
discussion. Okay.
Thanks for
go ahead.
helping me, Mr. Chairman. You're so
All
good.
right. No problem.
Okay.
You've been here in this chair.
But I forgot, it was 30 years ago.
Oh.
It's in the aquifer district, so drinking water is affected. I believe that it changes the character of the neighborhood. And I'm sorry, but horses have flies and they attract rodents, and I'm very concerned about the lake. And Pine River Pond has already experienced a problem with the lake. And believe me, I understand that it's a personal issue, but as one person, I have to speak for the whole town, and the town made a 500-foot setback because our lakes are so important to them. And in the master plan, that's what we get our economic base from. Okay, I won't say anymore.
All right. Other comment on the motion? Robert, Judy,
No, I don't have.
and George?
No.
All right. Then I'd ask for a vote, and an affirmative vote is in support of the motion that the proposed use would diminish surrounding property values. Is that correct, Danny?
Yes.
All right. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Abstain.
Aye. All right. The next item. Granting the variance would or would not be contrary to the public interest. And then I would ask for a motion on that topic.
Motion to deny. I believe that it is contrary to the public
Okay,
interest.
let me stop you there.
Okay, right, thanks.
Any second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay. All right, Annie, if you want to continue.
What she says here, 1 minute. The public interest is in preserving the water. That is the reason for the zone. Also, the public interest is in maintaining their property values. And I believe that those would be diminished. And the public interest is the whole town, and the whole town benefits from Pine River Pond.
Anyone else wish to comment on this motion? Either for or against? All right, then I would ask for a vote on the motion that granting the variance would be contrary to the public interest. All those in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Abstain.
Abstain, George?
I'm abstaining. Is that your
I'm-
vote also?
I'm in favor. So 3-0-2. All right. The third criteria, granting the variance would or would not do substantial justice. Anyone wish to offer a motion on that item?
I believe that it will do justice to Mrs. Gray. So I move that that is to be accepted.
All right. We'll have a second to George's motion.
I'll second it.
All right. So a motion made and seconded that granting the variance would do substantial justice. George, do you want to comment on that?
Well, I think that I have already done so. I think that in my view, the negative effect of this is negligible. I understand that it's a big concern that everyone has, but I weigh the amount of the danger, which I think is minimal, against the damage to Mrs. Gray, which I think is substantial. And so, when I weigh the two things, I say the justice is to help Mrs. Gray.
All right. Anyone else have a comment, either for or against the motion?
I'm against his motion because I also weighed, and I like that you did that weigh thing with the balance, because that is what substantial justice is, Mr. Frothingham. I believe that the landowner still has reasonable use of her property, and that if the applicant were to put a horse on that property, the balance of justice would be weighed in her favor, and that the public would lose. I also we have testimony over and over again that Mrs. Gray is saying that she's 75 years old. She has arthritis. And I just feel so badly that, you're going to be shoveling that manure. And I just don't know how you can do that. So I would be against Mr. Frothingham's motion.
Judy?
I would be against the motion as well.
Robert, you second the motion. What's your thought?
There's a bond between Mrs. Gray and her horse that is hard to try to break. And having arthritis myself, that there's no cure for.
Right.
I get up every day, I do my chores. If I don't do them, nobody does them. It's a very hard decision to look at, what is it, just over 30 feet? If a variance is granted, it will be a conditional one that is limited and not extended over. I know that there are places, camps all over the lakes in town that don't even meet state code. They get grandfathered because they're kept in the family. And if they're sold, then the state says they have to be totally up to code. so they stay in the family. Runoff from a horse is minimal. It's one horse. It's hard. It's on an aquifer, yes. It's trying to weigh and balance the town and Mrs. Gray.
Thank you. I struggle with this particular item as well. And you know, it's clearly a matter of looking at the applicant, the application, the land. Having raised horses myself in the past, I know the impact of what an animal can be, and the companionship and camaraderie that develops. I think, though, all things considered, I'm going to be voting against this particular motion. But I would ask at this point for the board to indicate either in favor of the motion or against the motion that granting the variance would do substantial justice. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye. Nay,
Nay.
Nay.
I guess. N-E-I-G-H.
Moving, what's that?
N-E-I-G-H.
Moving on to number 4.
No.
The use is contrary or not contrary to the spirit of the ordinance. And I'd ask one of the members to make a motion on whether this application, again, is contrary or not to the spirit of the ordinance. Anyone?
I motion that it is contrary to the ordinance.
Do I have a second to that motion?
A second.
Any discussion, pro or con, on this?
Because it says, the ordinance states that no hoofed animals or fowl are allowed in that zone.
Okay. Anyone else? George?
I guess considering the way that we've already voted on the other matters, it would be inconsistent, and so I would say that it is not in the spirit of the ordinance, to be consistent with everything else that we've done and said.
All right. Board ready for a vote on the motion? All right. All those in favor of the motion as seconded, that the use is contrary to the spirit of the ordinance, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. That was unanimous. Yeah, unanimous, yeah. Number 5, I'm sorry. Literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance will result in an unnecessary hardship. And this is the area you spoke to, George. You want to make a motion on that?
Yeah, this is, let me make sure I got the wording of this correct, so I'm saying this correct. Would you say that again?
The literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship.
Well, I move that that is correct.
Do I have a second to George's motion?
Second.
All right. Moved and seconded that literal enforcement would result in unnecessary hardship, that being to the Grays. We have discussion on that.
I would like to state that hardship is related to the property, the land, and not the personal plight of the applicant. So although the applicant has written here that she's 75 years old and has arthritis, and cannot drive 50 miles per day, that is not, I believe, an appropriate answer to this hardship. The hardship concerning the land is that she still has use of it. It's not a unique property. There's no hardship because her property is too small, so she has to, ask for a setback, or there's other properties in the area that are like hers. And it could, it will change the character of the neighborhood.
Anyone else? Judy?
Well, I just wondered if there might be another alternative, that you could perhaps move your horse closer to where you live. I'm sure there are boarding places within Wakefield that would be more convenient for you. It would lessen the driving time, and it would lessen the burdensome care of the horse.
There is nothing in Wakefield that could even meet the standards that I have for my horse. That's
Okay. Robert,
that's why I want to move them.
Okay. Any comment, Robert? Okay. George, anything further on
No,
that?
nothing further.
All right, the motion is that literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed indicate by saying nay.
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 Nay. And going to put this to a general vote by the way of a motion. That motion is that the board in totality denies the application for a variance. Is there a second to my motion?
Second.
Any discussion? I have none, but would suggest we vote on my motion.
Well, I think it's a foregone conclusion, because in order to grant the variance, all 5 of the conditions must be met.
Yeah, I understand.
So I think it's obvious that we will vote to deny.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Ms. Gray.
Thank you. Thank you for all your time. Thank you very much.
We have another application before us. And we have our spokesman coming in. All right. Seeing that it's just 8 o'clock, we have an application submitted on behalf of the Hendersons on North Morrison Road. Application for variance. Does everybody have their record?
Yes.
That's mine. Oh, wait, maybe not. Yeah. What's this? Yeah, I think that. Do we have more on, is it Henderson?
Henderson, yeah.
That was awful. I feel so bad for her.
Do you need another one? Thank you, Russ.
Thanks, Russ.
You got one there? Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. Okay. Similar as we did with the prior matter, we'll hear first from the applicant or the applicant's agent. We'll solicit any input in favor, any input opposed, and any correspondence. So without further ado, if you would like to join us, and if you could identify yourself for the members of the board.
Tyler Matthews with Lake Living Consultants.
And if each of you could identify yourself to Tyler.
I'm Robert Baxter.
Judy
Alternate.
DeRoche, member.
Annie Robbins, member.
George Frothingham, Vice Chair.
Don Stewart, Chair. So if you begin,
Looking for a sideline variance for a generator and propane tanks for the Hendersons. That's about it. 10-foot side setbacks and looking to put it 2 feet off the line right now.
and I'll mention for the record, we had a site visit this afternoon. Had an opportunity to see where the proposed location of the generator and probable location of the tanks for this particular property. Is there anything unique about what's being proposed here?
Unique, not that I know of.
It's a non,
Andy, Jeff?
it's a non-conforming lot.
Okay.
Is that what you meant?
Well, you know, that's clearly a good response. Okay. Will this be, if the board grants a variance, will this be done this fall, this early winter?
Yes, I'd like to fix everything and put the generator in.
Okay. And I'm sure you realize that there is a waiting period once the board votes, if it votes to grant the variance, and an appeal period that exists out there.
Okay.
Yeah. Was it 20?
30 days.
30
days.
days, yeah.
If it is granted, then yeah.
Yeah. Now, we will never tell you to take a risk and move forward ahead of that time, because if you do, you do it at your peril.
Own risk, yeah.
Anyone on the board have a question about this application? Robert, you were the only one who didn't make the
I
site
didn't make
visit.
Consequently, I don't know locations and reason for,
I can show you right here on that map right here. So it's on this side. This is kind of where we have all our mechanicals going into the garage. And these, it's a small map, but proposed propane tanks there and generator here off the side setback. The neighbor has a garage there, but it's not his actual house. His house is here. So that's what we're looking to propose. Which I think it actually is before it. Yeah, just kind of a blown up version of it. And the only reason it's closer to the line is because we need to be 5 feet away from vents or window openings. So that's why it's closer to their property
they
than
don't have
ours.
any windows and openings.
Correct.
Anyone else have any questions of Tyler?
You didn't draw windows or doors on here, did you?
No, I did not.
Having done building and whatnot, at times we've had to remove or tanks or something.
Yep.
Asking perhaps why that might not be considered.
Taking a window out.
Yeah.
I think before I went that route, I would maybe try and get a variance to put it on the lake side of the property, maybe, or something, to not take the, I don't know, I haven't gone, that didn't even come into, I don't, hoping to not take a window out.
Well, you know,
Yeah.
I'm asking that.
Yeah. If I'd have to go back to the drawing board, I
You know,
guess.
I'm looking at it like I'm over here.
Yep.
Look at that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I see more distance here, and If that was me here, I'm probably consider closing something off.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
that's not quite an accurate depiction of the area for Mr., what's your last name? Baxter to be really looking at, is it?
No, it's just,
Well, I was just going to ask that point too.
Yeah, I mean,
Permission to
you-
explain.
Yeah.
Since you were not at the
I
site.
know,
Yeah.
but this makes it look so big, but
and
it
it's
isn't.
not, I mean, this line should really be like right along here. These have to be like 5 feet from the wall of the
Yeah.
structure.
Yeah.
So,
Excuse me, that's 5 feet from any penetration.
right,
They-
any
They
window.
actually can
Right.
be put right up against the building.
Right, right. But there was some conversation today at the site walk about, instead of having them in a 4 cluster, putting them in a straight line to.
Which we're gonna do.
Which
yes.
would
help the neighbor. as well.
facilitate the
Yeah.
distance from the window.
Yes.
You're right. Technically, this isn't to scale, and it probably will be right down the middle when we have it in a
Yeah.
line.
Right.
I was,
Maybe the chairman would refresh our memories as to what Mr. Russ
Yes.
Burkholt said while he was at the
Well,
site walk.
what Russ had said, the code enforcement officer, was that the 4 propane tanks that were on site, one of them was too close to an opening a window in the house. And he suggested that rather than them being clustered as 4 together, that they be put in a line and positioned at that point then still approximately 2 feet off the property line. And it would be more than 5 feet off the building.
Yeah,
And of course, clearly more than 5 feet from an opening or a window or place of penetration. And that the position of the generator would run, again, pretty much in that same line as the tanks being put down. Now, this was an area between, if we were standing looking at it towards the lake, on your left-hand side is the garage wall of the neighbor, without any openings in that wall at all. Then to your right was the house, the applicant's house, and along that wall were a number of openings or points of penetration. It was for
air conditioner.
yeah,
compressor,
window, air conditioner,
exhaust.
yeah, there was an exhaust outlet, and everything again is being placed in this one area, as has been suggested. Maybe the only logical place on the property, because the options would either be literally out in front of the house, between the house and the water, or possibly on the other side of the property near what looked like maybe a shed or a garage possibly. But then everything would have to be dug underground for electrical and propane, to get it back into the house. The connections for the electricity coming in the house were right there as well. And I think those were buried, as I remember. I think they came off a pole and were running buried alongside
Yes.
the house.
Yes.
Then up and
correct.
in.
Yep.
Okay.
and the generators that they have, Mr. Burkholt said that he would, if we were to approve this, that he would make sure that the model met the
Clearances.
the code.
Yep.
Yeah.
Rough idea, you've got electrical buried, how close?
Although there's a pole over here and the electrical comes in here, but then part of it runs along the side of the building and in the house.
On the house or underground?
Underground.
Yeah,
How
it's,
many feet? And you're gonna,
It's required for all new builds underground.
your distance between your tanks
It'll
and the
be
electrical?
the 5 feet, because it's right along the building with the opening.
Because I know that isn't it something like 3 feet you gotta be apart for piping and electrical?
I don't believe so, but we could ask Russ. But I don't
know
think
in
there's
Maine, we're required to have 3 feet between.
propane and underground, but
Yes.
both are underground.
Yes.
Well, if you lined them all up in a straight line, you'd have 3 feet
Yeah.
between them.
And that's what
Yeah,
Russ
they
said.
go into the house in a
That's what
different
Russ
spot
was
too, so
recommending.
it wouldn't. It
Well,
could easily
the
be done.
propane wouldn't be going into the house.
No,
It
it's,
would only go from the tanks to the
Yes, yeah,
generator.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
I'm asking about the
Yeah.
distance here.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That restricts the neighbor from putting windows or opening in, right?
It may not, to be honest with you. If it's in a line, it's probably it probably meets.
If they decided they wanted a window.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Do we have a
and
letter?
let me jump ahead a little
Okay.
bit. We have an email from that immediate neighbor,
Right.
being Chapman, John and Noreen. And this was issued this afternoon. We have no problem with the propane tank setback as long as the setback does not interfere with us putting back in a window in our garage and is not over our property line. Well, I think first, tank's not gonna be over the property line.
Right.
But the question would be with the Chapmans vis-à-vis Henderson is where would they propose that window to be?
Right.
Because conceivably, they might wanna put it within 5 feet of the tanks, all right?
If you were to accept something like that, could you put in, some fine print of it stating something like that?
A
Do you
condition.
know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm just
it's
curious.
it's difficult at this point for us, though, I think, to define a condition that would say,
Appease the,
yeah, to appease the neighbor, since we don't know where the neighbor might put in a window.
Yeah. I just spoke with him on the phone. He has a window
okay.
opening already made. He just didn't have time to put the window opening, so
Oh,
Where do you
is
know
it?
where that is?
I would have to go
relative
with the inside now.
Yeah.
I don't. I'd just be guessing if I.
Because it has to be 5 feet from the generator,
From,
right?
The generator would have to be 5 feet from an opening
From
in the
the
propane
window.
tanks. Yep.
And how far does it have to be, how far does the window have to be from the propane tanks?
same,
5.
Same.
Yeah.
5 feet.
So he'd have to put it between, well, I don't know, is that still 5 feet? I don't know. Jeez.
I'm gonna offer a suggestion,
Yeah.
and that would be, maybe what we really need to do at this point is to table this until we hear specifically from Chapman, where is the window?
Yeah,
Where is it? Give you a chance to find out where is it. Maybe it's a non-issue, as we sit here. But I'm hesitant to approve a variance where there's an undetermined impact by your putting the tanks and the generator in place. What's the rest of the board think? Does that make sense?
I agree with that.
yeah,
Um,
we're almost there. I
Yeah.
just, this letter just came in tonight,
Yeah.
so, how long will,
I think both parties need to coordinate,
Yeah,
because, this is a situation where you're limiting a neighbor.
yeah, it may be
Yeah.
adversely affecting where they
Right.
want the window.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's
so
such
do we
close
still,
quarters.
if we continue to a date certain, do we have to do newspaper, postings, or can we just do
Just do I think just do the
do we just do the
posting
posting?
on the
Well,
board.
could I make
Agenda,
a,
yes.
Yeah.
could I
You're
make a
thinking.
point?
Yeah.
Sure.
I think it was pretty clear from the meeting this afternoon that both of the code enforcement people have said that they will inspect and double check to make sure that all of the requirements are met regarding clearance from windows and everything
Mhm.
else before issuing a permit for this project.
Mhm.
Maybe we could just rely on them to do that. What is in front of us is wherever they put those tanks, and assuming that they put them in a way that satisfies the legal requirements for safety, but the problem is that they're too close to the lot line, and the variance that they're asking for is to allow them to put this stuff, both the tanks and the generator, within the side setback. I think if we wish to, we could grant that variance to allow them to put these things within 2 feet of the lot line and allow the code enforcement people to do their job and make sure that they're placed in a safe manner.
But
Yeah,
at
you
this
said
point,
we don't know when-
but at this point, we don't know where the neighbor's window
Yeah.
is
Where he
gonna
wants
be.
to put his
So-
window, that's the problem, is it?
Yeah.
Well, you can discuss it with the neighbor, find
May
out
I
where the window
respond?
is. Did I hear somebody say that he's made some work on the inside of the building? to
Probably already
locate the
framed
windows?
out.
Probably
Yeah.
already
Yeah.
framed.
Yeah.
You can check that and find out and make sure that the tanks are placed appropriately relative to that window.
Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman,
Yes,
if we were to proceed, how would we determine, number one, the proposed use would not diminish surrounding property values? We don't know that, so how could we grant that? If the abutter didn't agree with where he wanted to put the window.
well, the abutter's already supposedly framed for a window.
Right, but we don't know where it is.
We don't know where
So
that is.
how can we, and if he's not privy to the 5-foot rule, what if he doesn't wanna put his window
Yeah.
where that is?
Well, that's why I said
Right,
maybe,
and I
maybe
do,
we
with all
table
due
this.
respect to Mr. Frothingham, who I, admire greatly, in his opinion as well, I would table, just
Yeah.
for a short time, if we could, if we don't have to do the whole public notice and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole newspaper, requirement.
It could be
We can
like a
continue it.
continuance.
A continuance, we already did the site walk,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, we've done all that, notified the
Can we
abutters,
come back
all of
tomorrow?
that. I can't come tomorrow.
Oh, that's right, there's
No,
gonna
we
be a
need 20
snowstorm.
24 hours notice.
Oh, that's right too, right,
Yeah.
good,
Okay.
good catch.
Yeah.
That's why you're the chair.
Yeah. I'll move that we table this matter to a date certain, pending input from the Chapman, specifically where their window is going to be, and confirmation it does not adversely, the position of the generator and tanks do not adversely impact where they want that window. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I have a second, yeah.
Vote? Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
So we're gonna-
Now, let's determine a date certain.
Yeah,
Our next meeting is, I think it's the 19th, 17th maybe. Victor.
but can we do it this month?
You won't have me.
Oh,
I'm gone for a couple of weeks.
oh, we won't have
But
Mr.
that
Chairman.
doesn't mean it can't be heard. We'd have to have someone else sit, and George could manage the,
Yeah, George.
Right,
meeting.
and we could have an alternate. I was gonna say substitute, but that's the wrong thing.
all right, the 17th is, the 17th is the next
Okay,
scheduled meeting, or probable meeting, but that doesn't preclude the board from meeting next week, even a week from tonight.
Yeah, we could do that.
how does, are we allowed, should we consider the applicant's schedule, or is that not really germane?
Well, would you be available a week from tonight?
Yeah, I can be, well, now that yes, I am. Yep.
Okay.
Or, but I mean, if we wait until the 17th, there may be another application, and then we, would have we would be able to do them all at once instead of making a special meeting.
Yeah,
What's your
Well, that,
thought?
like I said,
But
I'm,
don't we want to all
I'm-
do haste here to get this, this
I
installed?
feel like we should. Is
Yeah.
this pending? Get it done?
that would be my thought. Get
Okay,
it done.
all right,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I mean, back in, was it July, I think we accelerated.
Yeah, we had,
Okay,
yeah,
good.
we had
A meeting,
another one
All
in
right.
July.
So
All
what,
right, I move that the board meet a week from tonight at 7 PM to continue this this variance
26th.
application.
Thank you.
this,
26.
26.
okay.
At what time did you say?
7 p.m.
7 p.m.
Does that work for you, George? I won't be here.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
okay.
All right.
What do you exactly need from me then?
What I need from you as well as from the neighbor is the specifics of where is the window that they're gonna be putting in and how does it relate to the generator and the tanks. So a drawing would be ideal,
Okay.
which would show the,
The
Distances.
dimensions.
yeah, the
where it
dimensions,
is.
the position, where the window is, how big it is, you know, where it fits relative, you know, distance-wise, to the tank or tanks and the generator.
Should the building inspector be involved in that before they come here?
He
Or-
should, I think you can have the discussion with Russ.
Mhm.
Yeah, the answer is yes. Yeah.
So you might want to give him a call.
Well, I think Victor will probably give him
Or,
a heads up.
yeah,
'cause,
yeah, that's true. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
I'll talk with him anyway, so.
All right. So again, the motion is you meet a week from tonight at 7
7
p.m.
Mhm.
Yep,
Do I have a second to that motion?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
One abstain.
Do you need this stuff ahead of time?
I think if you come in with it, that
That's
should be
fine.
sufficient. If for some reason you don't have, you know, resolution of that, reach out to Victor and he can
Yeah.
contact the board members
I'll
and
do
Yeah.
that, yep.
maybe then gets put out until the 19th
Yep.
or 17th of December. Okay. Thank you. Anything else for the board on this matter? Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. We have just a couple of items before everybody gets their coats on. We have the minutes from the October 15th meeting. Everybody had a chance to peruse those?
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yes,
Mhm.
No, I don't think I have.
they're in your
Do you have them
email.
there, Judy?
They're in my email?
Yeah.
Oh. I probably looked at them.
Just say yes.
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 Motion to approve the minutes. Did Miss Janine make the changes that you requested?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Motion to approve the minutes
I'll
from,
second that.
from October
15th.
15th.
All in favor?
Uh,
No off. Technically, Robert would abstain since he wasn't
Right.
sitting that time. One other item, just of more a general matter, and that has to do with our site visits.
Yeah,
You know, we had one screw up that I'll take ownership for, and that was having it in the dark almost.
oh, that
Yeah.
happens, yeah.
But today's was scheduled in the afternoon to accommodate Russ and Victor. But I think I for one, would like to suggest we revert back to a Saturday morning site walk, 9 or 10 in the morning, you know, at least during the winter time. And then as we approach spring and summer, we can revert back to maybe an evening site walk.
Yeah, as long as it's, but if it's called off, will you let us know somehow? Because
If
of
a
the weather.
sidewalk was- oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
because of the
yeah,
weather. Sometimes the weather
yeah.
can be tricky for
Yeah.
getting out of our roads.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think what I would suggest, we actually would coordinate that through Victor,
Yeah.
since he's got everybody's
Yeah,
emails
okay.
out there. But has everyone given Victor their cell phone numbers?
No, but I think we should.
That'd probably be good if you keep that in the record. Yeah.
was gonna say, I'll email it to you.
I'll
tomorrow.
email it to you.
Okay.
Okay,
Easy.
all right.
I'll have my people get to you.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Yes, but did you, I know it's late, but are you gonna look at the, rules of procedure?
For,
Isn't it on the agenda? No? I know it's late
I don't,
anyway. I thought it said something
it
about
may have been on there, but that may have been just a general
Oh,
item, I suppose. I don't have anything specific on that.
all right. I didn't know. I looked at the state handbook and I compared it to ours.
Oh.
Wasn't that different, really? Just,
So that'll be the subject of an entire evening. I think,
yes,
yeah.
but wasn't that different, actually?
Yeah. All right. So,
Motion to adjourn. Did we do it?
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No opposition. Thank you.
Oh.
All right.
Okay, good night.